Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Fallon and today I'm going to be sharing with you another collab with my friend Kris from Sew the Distance. If you remember last year we did a fun collab together with layer cakes, and this time we're going to be doing another collab with layer cakes, but it's going to be just a little bit different this time. So last time we made table runners, so this time we're doing another layer cake, and we've been actually trying to plan this for a while and kept running into little bumps of me being really busy or her being really busy. So this is the Anne of Green Gables fabric, and we both really fell in love with this fabric line, and we were talking about it together, and we just really wanted to do something with it. We've had these layer cakes for so long, but we finally got our schedules to work out. So we're going to be bringing you a fun quilt project using the layer cake. So we each have some background fabric that we're bringing into this. So I believe hers is a little bit darker. So you'll see a little bit of a difference there, which I think will be really fun to see what you like and what might work best in your project. And then this time, instead of using a book, we are actually doing this cake mix recipe. I've been wanting to try these for so long. So we both thought this would be just perfect for this project because she's never used them either. So you'll get a great review from two different people who probably have slightly different ideas on quilting and what works for us. So I think you'll really like watching both videos and seeing what we think of them. Like I said, I've never used these before, so I'm really excited to try them. And make sure that you check out Kris's channel. I'll put a link to it down in the description because she's actually going to be using a different pack of these cake mix recipes. I'm using the first one. I believe she has pack 8. So you'll also get a great idea of what different projects you can do with these mixes, because each mix makes a variety of different blocks. So it's just so much. I'm so excited about this collab. You guys, I think you're really going to love it. So make sure you check out her channel too. If you're not already subscribed to her, make sure to subscribe and like her video. If you're here from Kris's video to see me, thanks so much for checking me out. I'd love for you to check out some other videos and also subscribe to my channel. So let's take a closer look at the cake mix, especially if you're not familiar with them. All right, so the cake mix recipe, they're from Miss Rosie's Quilt Company for Moda. And as you can see here, what you need to make these is the cake mix, and there's a huge variety of them. I didn't realize how many there were until me and Kris really started looking at them as a possibility for doing this layer cake project. So each of these cakes mix contains 44 recipe cards. So the recipe cards are these here, which you kind of use as a template to make your blocks. And note though, there are 44 recipe cards, and most layer cakes have 42 squares of fabric in them. So you'll have some papers left over. I think that's nice because since you're going to be ripping these out of a book, what if you accidentally rip one too wrong or something, you'll have some backups, or you could use them to make like a coordinating quilt, quilted pillow cover or something like that. So I think it's nice that you have a little bit extra either for mishaps or just for making something coordinating for your project. So with using these, you'll also need your print layer cake, and you can either get 2 print layer cakes and combine them with a dark or light fabric or something like that, or you can get some background solid fabric. I chose to have a print and a solid. So you'll need, those 2 packs, or it says you could use 3 1/8 of yard of background squares to create your background squares. So you could just cut down yardage if you wanted to. So with this recipe book, the 2 10-inch squares will yield 4 4-inch by 4-inch finished half square triangles, and then 1 8 by 8 finished half square triangles. And 2 assembled recipe cards. So 2 of these squares that we're going to be doing will make a 16 by 16 inch finished block. So these are the blocks that can be made using this recipe book. So you could make a block that looks like this one, that one, that one, or that one. So you have 5 options, and then you could probably definitely combine them and do your own thing with them if you wanted to as well. So I'm really excited about this. And one thing that I noticed when looking at the book is, one, they give you some areas here where you could draw out your quilt and kind of get an idea of what you want. And then here it shows you how to sew this to be the most effective. So you start at the star and you would sew along here, or along 1, and then follow the arrows to 2. Then you would come up and do 3, 4, and then sew along 5 along here. And then it tells you where to cut. So you'd want to cut this line first, and then you would cut along your other lines here. So I really like that, you know, that it makes it just so easy for you, telling you where to start and where to go, so you can do this in the quickest and most effective way possible. So I'm going to take one of these out. And here's what we would do. So we have one of our papers. Just as a side note, who else loves when the layer cake company puts all the prints on the back for you so you can see them at the quilt shop? So much easier. I love when they do that. I always hate when I'm at a quilt shop and when they have them all wrapped up with the plastic wrap and you can't flip through it and see the prints, and then they have nothing on the back. Maybe it's just me, but I love that little touch. So really quick, I know you kind of got to see, but this, I'm telling you, this fabric line is so pretty. It's probably because I really love purple, especially lavender, and I especially love how it pairs with green. So I'm excited about this quilt project, you guys. So what you do is you're going to take one of your prints, if you're doing it that way, and one of your backgrounds. And if you're doing the same prints and just purchase 2, you would, you know, probably grab a light and a dark that you like together and put them right sides together. But since I'm doing the background, it says put your lighter color on top, and this fabric is nice. It's nice and thick. Now this one, I am going to need to take note, because there's definitely a right and a wrong side on this, because it's one of those kind of like grunge fabrics. So there's definitely a side that's the front and the back. So it's not like typical, you know, background fabric. So you put them right sides together. It says to keep the lighter fabric on top, and then you just place the paper on here. And I did as suggested in the instructions here. I lowered my stitch length, and that's just so when you need to rip the papers off later, it's a little bit easier for you. All right, so we put these right sides together. I am going to get all of these prepped before I go to sew. I like to do that because I find it just makes it a little bit easier for me to kind of work production style, if you will, where I get all of these ready at once, and then when I go over to the sewing machine, I can just sit and sew them all at once. So what I'm going to do to kind of keep them together is put a few pins in and kind of try to keep it away from where I'm sewing, so it doesn't get in the way of my sewing. I can just keep it all in, and I'll just start sewing them all. So I'll sew along 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and carry across to 6. Okay, so I'll sew all those, and then after I get them all sewn, that's when I'll come back and do all the cutting, and then do all of the ripping of papers, and then do all the pressing. I like to do everything in one step all at once, instead of having to, you know, get one of these prepped, go sew it, and then cut it, and then press, you know, pull off the papers and then press it, and then start with the next one. I feel like I'm much more effective if I get all of one step done at once. So I'm going to get all these together, and then we'll get to sewing them. All right, I have all of my cake mix recipes sewn, and you can probably see the sew lines better on this side. I do want to point out one thing. I use 2 different brands of layer cakes, and they're actually slightly different in size, which made it kind of interesting trying to make sure I had everything lined up properly. So I just want to point that out because a lot of people don't know that sometimes the layer cakes and different pre-cuts can be slightly different sizes. So if you're doing something like this, it might be easier to make sure you're purchasing the same brand. It might be more likely that they are the exact same size. So after this step, I'm going to go through and cut all of these. So remember, we're cutting the solid lines now, and it does indicate that we need to cut this line going across the complete diagonal first. So I'm going to line up my ruler right along that solid line and make my cut. And then I find it easier to cut the borders first while I can cut them in one long strip rather than cutting 4 different sections through here. So I cut along these sides. And then I'll cut all these smaller triangles. So remember, I like to do all of this in groups. So I like to cut all of these at one time and then pull the papers all off and then press them all. But while recording here, I am going to show you taking off the papers and pressing just this one. But I am going to really be cutting all these at once, then pulling off all the papers and then pressing them all. So after cutting, I'd go through and take all these papers off. A nice pair of tweezers can help pulling the little strip off at the end. Remember, we did lower the stitch length on our sewing machine, which helps tearing these become a little bit easier. It really isn't that hard. It's just kind of monotonous. Just ripping all these off. It takes time, but you are going to get really accurate half square triangles here. And I mean, it isn't really that different from having to trim all of your half square triangles if you're doing it that route. All right, so now after you get all the paper off of all of them after they're cut, you can grab your iron and a pressing mat. I'm going to press them all to the printed side of the fabric, so all my seams are going to go towards the printed. Just add some heat right along the seam to help set that. So we have the larger half square triangle and then 4 smaller that are all the same size. All right, so there are my blocks. So I'm just gonna work through this whole stack, cutting all of these, and then I will rip all the papers off and then press them all. After that, we'll be able to look at the cake mix recipes and decide which pattern we want to do, or we can make a variety of each and kind of make it a sampler quilt. We'll just have to decide. All right, so the quilt is finished. I quilted it and bound it, and I actually think it turned out pretty good. What do you think? So I just did really simple quilting. You'll be able to see it on this side better. I think it turned out pretty good. So my final thoughts though, it was interesting using the cake mix recipes. So one, I'm going to talk about some of the things I liked about the cake mix recipe. So I like that there was such a variety of patterns you could do. And I really liked that once you got all of your pieces cut, got them pressed, you could change your mind on the pattern that you wanted to do fairly easily. There was one that I thought I was going to do, and then I just didn't like the way it looked with the fabric I used after laying it out, so I went a different direction. I like that using the cake mix, it makes it really easy to kind of switch gears and change up what you had planned on doing. I do like that it was really easy to use. It was very straightforward. It was easy to sew everything. It was easy to stay organized because you're just putting two layer cake pieces together and then sewing along the lines, cutting them out, ripping the paper off. It was really, really easy to do. So some of the things that I think didn't work for me with this process was one, it was very, very monotonous. You are just, putting the two layer cakes together, sewing along the lines, and there's really no thinking involved. And I think in some cases that might be nice, but for me it was just very, very boring. And because you have that paper on top, you don't even really get to see the pretty fabric that you're sewing or anything like that. So the sewing was pretty much the easiest part, but when it got to cutting, that was very easy as well. But the ripping off of all those papers was mind-numbingly boring, and a lot of times it didn't all pull off together, so I had to get tweezers and kind of pull little pieces off. It felt like that just took forever, and after a while you didn't even really want to work on it anymore because it was just so frustrating pulling all those off. Something else that I found interesting too was that after I did all that, I thought all of my blocks would be perfect and everything would come together very easy. It did not though. And me and Kris talked about it a little bit, and we were trying to figure out why things seemed a little off putting them together. And the only thing we could really come up with was that maybe some of the papers are all printed slightly different, maybe paper error, printing errors or something like that, because it really felt like they should all come together really nicely, but there were so many that were just off a little bit, and we couldn't figure it out, and it was really weird. I mean, you can see it came together fine, but to me, I thought the project would really be something geared really well toward a beginner, so they didn't have to worry about using a ruler and cutting and all of that stuff. But with it being off, I think it could be really frustrating to a beginner because, I've been sewing for a really long time, and I just couldn't figure out why a lot of the blocks wouldn't line up. You would think it would come together very easily once you got to that point. So yeah, those are my main thoughts on it. I would probably never purchase one of them again. It just wasn't for me. It wasn't a method for me. I could see where it would be of a lot of value to a lot of people, that they would really like them, that it would make things really easy to just sew, follow the lines and cut, have all those ideas for bringing everything together, but it just was not for me. I think they're a great idea. I think because there are so many and so many different options for putting quilts together, I can really see a lot of value in them. Just for me, I didn't like using it. It just wasn't something I really thought I would, because I was looking at all the different layouts and I was like, this is a really fun idea because you could kind of do a sampler quilt and play around with them and different stuff like that. But it was not for me. But yeah, I think I'm happy with the quilt. I'm happy I tried it. I'm happy that I know how they work now. now if somebody asks me about them, asks me my thoughts, I can give them a good review. I feel like a review on it that should let them know with their own sewing style if it's something they would like or wouldn't like. So I'm glad I gave it a try. Just I probably won't do it again. I would love to hear your thoughts though. If you have used them before, did you like it? Did you feel the same way I did, that it was very monotonous? I would love to know. And be sure, if you haven't already, to go check out Kris's video. I think I mentioned that she was doing the recipe 8, but I believe it was 5, so I got that wrong. But still, definitely check hers out. I got to see her quilt already, and I think it is so beautiful. Hers turned out so good, and it's so fun seeing that we used very similar fabric, but got such a different look to our quilt from it. And I really like how hers turned out. So be sure to go check out that video. And again, if you aren't already following my channel, I would love for you to subscribe, leave a comment, let me know what you thought of the cake mix and your thoughts on giving it a try if you haven't already. I'd love to hear from you. See you next time, and thanks for watching. Bye.